Hey everybody, tonight we got a great video. We're going to bring in Brad Harper from Harper Growing Solutions. We're going to talk about all the liquid plot doctor products he has. We're going to answer a question about liquid lime. Liquid lime is very controversial. A lot of people think it works. A lot of people don't think it works. They think it's snake oil. We're going to bring Brad Harper in. He's going to answer that question on tonight's video. So tonight we're joined by Brad Harper, Harper Growing Solutions. He's going to answer a lot of questions we have as far as liquid lime, liquid fertilizer, liquid nitrogen, and calcium products. So Brad, welcome to the show. You want to talk about your background a little bit and what got you into this food plot industry?
Yeah, so basically grew up farming for as long as I can remember, and we started doing food plots, 15, 16 years ago, something like that. And then I got asked to start consulting farmers about 7 years ago now, and just kind of been doing that ever since. And about 5 or 6 years ago when we started this business, just basically brought everything together, the farm side, consulting the farmers, and then the food plot kind of experience, if you will. So we've been doing that now for a few years and running these products on the ag side for at least 10 years now, and then running them on the food plot side for that 5, 6, 7 since we started. And we're on over 30,000 acres total in between the food plot and farm side, and hopefully answer some questions here for you.
Now that 30,000 acres, that's with the plot doctor products. Now you don't have a separate product for farmers and a separate product for food plotters. This is all the same thing.
Correct.
Okay,
I'm drawing up the same programs
right.
for both.
So we're not like
different.
a double secret club for the farmers and then the food plotter guys get the rest of the barrel.
Nope.
This is everything. All right, that's good to know. So folks, correct. I like to think I know some stuff, but this is why we bring in professionals like Brad. I'd rather have it come right from Brad rather than me being a filter. You're not getting it from a sponsored celebrity. You're getting it right from a gentleman who does the chemical side, the liquid side for a living. So if you're really interested in learning about chemicals, this is the gentleman to learn it from. So, all right, Brad. So the very first thing we want to talk about is liquid lime. Now, a lot of social media posts. There's a lot of arguments. People say it's snake oil. There's, one of the biggest products out there. Obviously, we're not going to name names, but it's a big white jug that's pushed real heavy. A lot of YouTube stars are pushing it. Is it snake oil? And what's the difference between the plot doctor liquid lime? This is what we're talking about here. A gallon jug. This is their liquid lime. What's the difference, one, between the plot doctor and the big white jug, or a lot of these other products on the market? And two, okay, somebody says liquid lime is snake oil. What's your response?
Yeah, so I think number one, to start off, the plot doctor is actually right on the label. It's derived from calcium carbonate. So if you look at ag lime, that's what that is. Now, in a ton of ag lime, on average, depending on the mine you get it from, there's anywhere from 6 to 18 pounds of actual calcium carbonate in that ton. And that's what's doing the heavy lifting as far as changing your pH goes. So when you look at a plot doctor 1 gallon jug of liquid lime, I say it's a 15-pound gallon. And you can, everything's right on there, calcium carbonate. So that's why we say that's equivalent to a ton, because of how much is in there.
Right.
So that's number one. So it's just concentrated liquefied ag lime.
Sure.
Now, there's a couple other products out there, and the biggest thing is just read the label. I know the one that we had talked about previously, it's a calcium carbonate product.
Okay.
Now, that's one that, generally speaking, we talk about calcium carbonate not raising pH. It's more of a calcium input. So whether you're putting that out for, root structure, for plant health, there's a lot of different reasons. Now, calcium chloride is one of the cheaper ones, and one that we normally don't like to use because it's chloride based. So we kind of like to go other routes.
So what does the chloride based product do to the soil?
Well, number one, in between the sodium and the chloride, that's going to inhibit bacteria and fungal populations. So now rather than trying to improve your soil health, we're kind of taking a step backwards. And we talk about that with granular fertilizer as well. With all the salt we're putting down, we're kind of taking steps backwards there. But then two, you are getting some calcium. So there's a lot of things that you might see if you've never put calcium down before and then you go to add it. there can be a benefit from that, but a lot of the times it's not actually raising pH. It's more you're just adding calcium to something that you hadn't before.
But the Plot Doctor
But that is actually
will actually raise pH.
correct.
For how? Oh, I'm sorry. For
no,
how
that's
long?
fine. Well, generally speaking, if you apply that, once that kind of gets washed in, and within days, you're going to start raising that. And generally speaking, we look at it's a season-long application because depending on your soil type, it might just be for that season, but we have seen a lot of carryover.
Okay.
To where if a guy draws a soil sample in the spring, we go out and we apply that liquid lime from Plot Doctor, let's say end of May, early June. When he goes and pulls another soil sample next spring, we're still at an elevated pH than what we were initially.
Okay.
Now that doesn't happen all the time. If you're in sandy soils and we get a bunch of rain, we're not really counting on that
Right.
to continue on, but just looking at it as an annual input.
Okay.
Now, too, with us on the ag side, a lot of farmers are switching over to that because
Okay.
them, too, are switching over to more of a liquid line of nutrients because we can add it in furrow, we can add it in the 2x2. Everyone's got booms on their drills now, so we can really start to move farmers over to the liquid side, and that's been a big thing that more and more people every year, in which that's kind of half the reason why we're so busy now.
So one of the questions we get, and I'm sure you get them as well, and we'd like to answer it here. Can I just do liquid lime every year instead of the egg lime or the pelletized lime?
So yes, you can. And a lot of guys are switching to that, and we like it because we're planning on using liquid fertilizer anyways. So therefore we can add all these in one tank, go spray it out, and we're done. But there's also instances, like I've worked with you, where guys might be in the low 4s, and it's like, well, we could use liquid lime every year, and that's not an issue. We can make that work, but it might still be a benefit for some spots to still do a ag lime or a pel lime in order just to help. You know, if he's using liquid fertilizers, we can still add the liquid lime, but maybe he wants to run some granular.
Sure. The granular, you mean granular
Fertilizer.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Or in that case, if he's that low, maybe in a heavier soil, that will really help if we add some ag lime or pel lime to just bump you up more long term rather than a season long application of liquid.
Okay. A lot of questions we'll get is, so let's say we have an acre. We want to move that number a percent. How much liquid Plot Doctor? Now, when we're talking about liquid lime, now we're going to talk about the Plot Doctor. This is completely different than the big white jug.
In which I think we answered those. I guess
Yep.
just to wrap that up a minute, talking about that one being a calcium chloride, there's a lot of other ones that might be like I don't remember what it is, but there's a few different alternative lime. And the biggest thing is just to read your label and do some Google searches. There's a lot of university studies out there that talk about the amount of lime and how those products can change pH. So I think that's well worth just doing a quick search just to do some background checking. There's finally some universities that are pushing, the facts on the liquid that we can still do a really good job, but it's just not near as long lasting. So just a quick Google search can really help out with that. But like you say, from now on, we'll kind of go over the Plot Doctor stuff. And why I kind of like to go down a different road than most is just because every food plot's different. Every piece of dirt's different. There's no one size fits all. There's no cookie cutter stuff. That's where I have everybody send me their soil samples so we can really look at that and dial that in. And that's something that once we get their sample, give you your recommendations, you can just take that and run with it. They don't have to get a hold of me every year. It's just, hey, this is where we're at. This is what we need to do. We can move on from there. But there's a few products where it's just like throw this amount on and they don't know the pH. They don't know the CEC. There's no way to physically say just put this amount on.
So you just can't say this gallon of jug is going to do this amount of benefit. You're not going to move it a point.
Correct.
You might move it a half a point depending on your soil. You might move it
exactly
0.7 of a point.
Yep.
So that's interesting.
Yeah, and on the back of our jug, we kind of have a relative chart per se, and that's because we're really equivalent to a ton. So a lot of guys can just take their soil sample, and if you need 2 tons, well, you can just 2 gallons. It's pretty simple because we're so close to that amount of the ton of ag lime. But it varies so much. So that's where just check your soil sample, see what you need, get a hold of me or John. And then there's a chart on the back of the jug for exact rates.
Okay. Last question about lime, and this doesn't really pertain to liquid. A ton of pelletized lime equals how much egg lime?
So the way we look at it on the ag side is Pel lime might be the 10 or 20% different, but not in the way that you see on social media.
Okay.
So if you need a ton of ag lime, we say, well, you could probably get away with maybe 18, maybe 1,700 pounds of Pel lime on average. But again, that goes back to what's called the CCE number, and that tells you how pure your lime is.
Sure.
And that'll kind of really help you to determine how much you can get away with. But on average, we're looking at maybe 10 to 20% less, not 10 to 20% of the total,
Right.
if that makes sense.
So 1,000 pounds of egg lime could be 900. Only need 900 pounds of pelletized lime.
Correct. Because
But
I
it
see a
could
lot to where guys say, oh, well, I'm recommended a ton of ag lime, but I only need to put out 400 pounds of pellet lime or something. And,
Okay.
and that's
Yeah,
normally not the case.
I've seen people say if you've got 1,000 pounds needed, you can get by with 500 pounds of pellet. I've
Yep.
never seen it. Okay.
No,
So hopefully that kind of cures things up for folks.
Yeah, because we've seen that a lot. And like I said, that's just kind of how we look at it on the ag side, dealing with farmers. So you could get away with using less just because it is easier to put out, and that's fine. But just kind of look at your CCE number of where you're getting that from or what's on the bag, and that'll help you out.
Now, what is CCE number? What is
The
that?
purity of the
Purity
lime
of the lime
itself
in the
to
bag.
determine how much that's going to change your pH or how much calcium carbonate's in there.
Okay. Alrighty. All right, so now we'll move to, you've got two products. One's called Pentacal and a liquid calcium as well, and that's what this one is. Can you explain the difference between the two, the use difference? I know we used a lot of this with our partners, Elliot, Jake, Randy in Lower Michigan, and they were amazed at how it turned. They're really hard. And you had said not really clay soil, but the amount of magnesium in there. So let's talk about Pentacal. Let's talk about the liquid calcium, the differences, and what situation you would use those in.
Yeah, so just to start out, like the Pentacal is a product we use solely on the ag side, but we do have a ton of food plot guys that have soils that could use that. And the calcium is what's actually in the Plot Doctor calcium jugs that we offer it over the internet. But Pentacal, to start with, when you look at your soil sample, we look at your CEC number, which kind of determines your soil type. Lower CEC means lighter, sandier soils, and the higher CECs, you got heavier, maybe clay-like soils, maybe more of a loamy. But then what we're looking at is in the base saturations, you have magnesium. And most of the time in Michigan, we'll have CECs of 9, 10, or 11, and guys will think that it's clay-like soils, but they'll have high magnesium. So anything over 18% of base saturation magnesium starts to get into a little too much, and you'll end up with tight soils. So Pentacal will be one that will kick the magnesium off the soil, put calcium in its place, and that'll open up the soil and help your air and water movement and just make it breathe a lot better. So in a lot of situations, we are having guys use the Pentacal just because it is so widespread in Michigan. We have seen it in other states as well, but especially when you get kind of that southeast Michigan, you run into really high magnesium levels. So we can really benefit from a calcium input that's based more for soil structure. Now the Plot Doctor calcium is more for your roots and your plant health. Obviously it's calcium on the ground, so we are going to get some benefits for soil structure, but it's not quite like Pentacal because that has some soil surfactants in it. So just to kind of keep those separate without getting too confusing, hopefully that's not terrible yet. But we've seen that overall, no matter what type of soil we have or how high our calcium levels are in our soil, by adding some that's plant available, we can help out with our root systems and we can help out with our plant health, whether that be through a drought or just having a healthier plant to grow through some stress. So that's been one that kind of no matter where we're at, we're adding a little bit all the time just to increase those numbers.
So to summarize, this is for soil,
Yep,
fixing soil. This is for the plants.
correct.
Okay, wonderful. All right. Okay, we've got some of your liquid foliar fertilizer. Can you talk about what's in here, what you would use it for, and then when you would spray it.
The Plot Doctor foliar is a really interesting product because it's one that most guys say they see the foliar and they just think it's, after the plant's up and growing, but it's actually one that is both. So we're kind of using that as our main fertilizer product. We're applying that right after planting on the ground, but we're also able to come back and use it as a foliar application. So I know we've done that here. We sprayed it on the ground at planting. Maybe 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks after planting, we can come back, just do a little bit on top as a foliar application. But what's really nice, because you have options, guys where their properties might be 4 hours away, maybe they don't have time to fertilize that day that they're planting, they just got to get it in, the rain comes, well, that's okay. We can come back that 3, 4, 6 weeks later, get all our
And it's the
fertilizer
same
on
product.
top.
You don't have to change anything.
Nope.
It's this one right here, the
Same
liquid.
product.
Yep, this is the one we're talking about.
So it's really nice because you got a lot of options. And with that being kind of like our main fertilizer product, whether you get a little bit out at planting and a little bit foliar, whether you get it all out right at planting, or some guys wait and they do it all 2 or 3 weeks after planting, you got a lot of options. But that's kind of our main fertilizer product. And that's different because all the nutrients are protected. So it's going to be chelated with carbon, which therefore we're kind of helping out building our soil health, building our bacteria, fungal populations, and kind of goes along with that no-till, just healthier soil, do a better job growing. But the rates are so low because it's protected compared to granular fertilizer is not protected, so therefore you need 100, 300 pounds per acre, what have you, and that's because they're planning on a bunch of that getting tied up in your soil, which you'll see on your soil tests when you have really high phosphorus numbers, or that's probably the biggest one.
That could be
from
years of synthetic input.
Correct.
Okay,
Just because it's not making its way to the plant, it's getting tied up in the soil because it's not protected.
Now you said a word, chelated. I see that a lot in both deer mineral fertilizer. Can you explain that quick so a guy like me can understand it?
5-second chemistry class.
Sure.
So phosphorus, positively charged. Basically what they're doing is they're covering that charge, then it can't get tied up in soil. So it's covered with carbon. So once that gets in the ground, it just kind of sits there, the plant takes it up, and then boom, you're covered. Okay. So just to make that super simple, chelated just means they're protecting the charge of whatever nutrient they're chelating in order to get it to where they want it to go.
All right. Spraying it, so you said we can spray it at planting while the seed's in the ground.
Yep.
Is there a time frame where we can't spray it anymore? So let's say, okay, so even, and we use some of this on our food plot screen, and you're actually, we'll let the cat out of the bag, you're working on a food plot screen specific fertilizer.
Correct.
To help make that wonderful product even stronger. Yeah. So we'll be able to hang a tree stand in those before the year's over with. But so there really isn't a time frame other than damage to the plants to where you can spray this.
And really the only time that would be bad is when your quad or whatever you're spraying with can't really drive over it.
Right.
You're going to do more damage with your quad compared to this.
There's not a risk of burning a plant.
No.
Anything like that. So you guys, and again, we keep referencing our home state of Michigan, but you folks that keep running into that northern Michigan drought, and I run the same thing. We still do some, I'm going to cover his ears, we still do some granular fertilizers, but you have to have not just one rain, multiple rains to get that incorporated, to get it activated. Now, with this liquid, people worry about burning their plants. And then you don't need rain to actually feed the plant now. So with this foliar spray, we can be in the middle of that 6-7 week drought we had last year. We had it up here as well. We can keep feeding those plants with this particular spray. And the fact that we're going to not risk burning them, that's a big thing.
Correct. And the number one thing with liquid product burning plants is going to be the amount of nitrogen, or what type of nitrogen, as well as if there's a lot of salt in there. If you got a really cheaper product that's using salt, those are the only two ways that you're going to really burn. So we're low on the nitrogen there, and because it's carbon based, you're not going to get burned from that.
Yeah, less than 1%.
Yeah, most of the time you're just burning from urea.
Okay.
Trying to foliar or urea product.
That actually ties well into the next question. You guys have a liquid nitrogen product. I don't have it here, but can you describe that? And would there be a chance, okay, are we going to spray it at planting? Or are we going to spray it as a foliar on the growing plants? And with this particular product, have a chance of burning the plants?
Yep. With that one, we can spray it at planting. Sometimes when guys are planting corn, or if a guy's planting brassicas and he knows he can't get back in time, then we will add some on the ground. But to help our wallet, it's going to be a whole lot better as a foliar application because we can use a lot smaller rate. We can get right in through the plant, and we don't need near as much because we're not really competing with everything that's going on in the soil. So that's more of an ammonium-based product, not urea. So therefore, we don't have to worry about burning. On average, like with corn or brassicas, we're probably looking at a gallon per acre rate. Corn, we're probably doing multiple applications compared to brassica. We're only doing one.
Love nitrogen.
And like with the screen, that's what we're using for our foliar N. We're using our Plot Doctor foliar with the N, just going in, I'm going to say, right around early August on average. And that's exactly where, normally before it was adding that urea at that time in the planting instructions. And we're just kind of subbing these out for these two here now. But you don't have to worry about burn because there's not much urea in there. And then this is, it's a fast acting, but there's some slow release in there. So when you go apply that, especially on corn or your screen, you're going to get a good jump right away, but that's going to help extend that out for the next few weeks that you'll get a good continuous growth for an extended period.
Now, one point he hit on, and you folks with drills, corn planters, he had talked about this, and I've actually seen this with Brandon on his drills. He actually has a spray system to where each coulter has a nozzle behind it. So instead of spraying a 10, 12 foot wide path, and you might be wasting a third of it, where the seed row is, he's got a sprayer right on there. So you're using less fertilizer, you're not actually going to encourage any weed growth, saving money with that spray rig. And so that's something to think about, even if you've got like a 2-row corn planter or a 4-foot drill, you can somehow get those coulters to where it's shooting before the plant emerges is going to get that fertilizer and only that plant.
Correct.
So,
and that's huge for corn, and a lot of the times we'll run like a liquid, some sort of a liquid nitrogen, whether it be this one or maybe a little higher percentage one in furrow with the corn, and then that way you're getting that nitrogen in there. But then also we're able to come back with maybe the foliar behind it, so we're then getting the carbon to help with our soil health everywhere, but we can save money by just putting what we want right next to that seed piece. But for guys with drills, I mean, if you got questions, let me know, but definitely a way to save some money.
Okay. One more question. Crazy guy like me that still runs a tiller now and then, these products will still work?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
The biggest thing is I like to just do it as the last step.
Okay.
Get all your planting done, then we'll come in and
before or
spray
after we cultipack, if say the last thing I do is pack, roll the seed in, then
come
spray?
back and spray.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, and the one thing we better touch on is all these products. I mean, the liquid lime is super thick because it's so concentrated. The calcium is thick, it's very concentrated, and then the fertilizer, because of all the carbon in there, they're all very thick products. So not only for the fertilizers, but even when you're just spraying herbicide, we like to look at our sprayers and our nozzles, and it helps to take filters out just to let that product go through so we don't have issues. And the nozzle size is huge. If we can put some more water out per acre, you're really going to benefit from any of the fertilizers and lime. But that's also going to help you with herbicide because you're just going to get better coverage. I mean, if you're trying to cover an acre with 5 gallons, that's pretty hard to do, even if you're just spraying glyphosate. So by going with like a 03 or 04 or 05 nozzle, depending on how big your plots are, we can adjust that. But you're going to get a better kill, or if you're using a pre-emergent, you're going to do a better job getting better coverage with a bigger nozzle size. So that's something that will really help everything you're doing with the sprayer.
Now, if the weather holds, because it's 38 degrees right now as we're shooting this here in Upper Michigan, we're going to try to do a video in the next day or two. I've got a 4-wheeler ATV Fimco sprayer. It's got 2 nozzles on it, and we're going to try to have Brad walk us through calibrating a sprayer. So I think that's a big thing. We've got this video. We want to do. We're going to do a chemical video. What you should and what you shouldn't look for. We're going to do a calibration on a 4-wheeler sprayer video because it's something people don't think of. We get a lot of questions. Okay, how much I'm spraying glyphosate? How many gallons? Well, I know for me, I drive at 3 miles an hour. I got a 2-nozzle sprayer. I got this particular nozzle. I'm about 22 gallons. That sprays an acre for me. Does it sound about right?
Yeah.
But those are those misting nozzles. That's not these. We don't want to use those misting nozzles. Okay. So that will help not only myself, but if you guys can learn something with that calibration video, we're going to probably actually show it in about 8 to 10 days, but Brad and I are going to shoot it probably tomorrow. So
Yeah, and that's something that regardless of what you're spraying, whether it be just glyphosate, if you're doing simazine or if you're doing Quinstar, like I said, anything you're spraying, if you calibrate, not only are you going to make sure you're putting the right amount down so you're not doing any damage, but that's also going to help your wallet because you're putting the right amount down and there's no guessing anymore. So really calibrating a sprayer is huge because you could do a lot of damage.
I think so. Yeah, we were talking about that it just seems to be, I don't think there's anything wrong with spraying. I think it's necessary, but it just seems to be people are probably overdoing it rather than underdoing it. And I think with your research, when the chemical video is going to be very interesting. You did a lot of research just on simazine, and myself included. Our eyes were open to a whole lot of stuff. And then honestly, this could be a boring video to people, but it's very important. This is very important stuff for a successful food plot. You might take your food plot from 80% up to 95%, or from 50% up to 70%. This is very important stuff. So.
Yeah, and
anything
I
else you
think
want to talk about?
It's impossible to kind of go into the benefits and how all this works in a one video. So I'm hoping that we can do another one and kind of go into a little more detail. And depending on maybe if you guys got questions, maybe we can break this down and do a video per product. I mean, let us know what you think.
Sure.
But definitely going through in a little more detail, talking about the benefits of the liquid side and especially the chemical video he's talking about. I mean, there's just so many different things to look at, and just we can do a lot of damage. So kind of making sure we know what we're doing, making sure we're reading the labels, and go from there. So yeah.
So the final thing, where can folks reach Brad Harper? How do we get a hold of you?
Yeah, so Facebook, Harper Growing Solutions. Instagram is Harper GS, I think. No, I'm going to have to double check that. And then my website is harpergs.com. And in one of those places, you'll find us, our numbers on there too, our emails there. Reach out, however, and we'll get back to you and answer some questions, hopefully.
If you've got questions,
Call John first.
yeah. So if you've got some questions, comments below, ask them. Hopefully we can, Brad, you'll be back probably next month. You're here picking up a substantial, Brad's one of our dealers. He's our dealer where are you located in Michigan?
Yeah, so I'm in Montague. I'm in between Muskegon and Ludington, right on the lakeshore of Lake Michigan.
Yep. So Brad's been one of our best, biggest selling dealers in Michigan. You're going to probably come back here maybe another month. You seem to come up here about once a month. Yep.
Yeah.
So if you guys got some chemical questions, some liquid fertilizer questions, ask them in the comments below, or we've got that asknorthwoods@gmail.com. We'll get a list of questions together, and then when Brad comes back, we'll try to answer them. So thanks for watching, folks. We'll see you in a few days.